Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. It is time to have a look at the British discounts that are on offer for the GE discounts. There's a lot of aviation ones, not a ton of ground ones. So we'll start off with the ground. We have the A13 Mark 1, 3rd Royal Tank Regiment. This is just a copy of the standard A13. The A13 is a fine vehicle, you know, it doesn't really do anything special. It's got an okay targeting speed for the 2-pounder, also at the same time has access to the vertical stab, so you can usually get the first shot off. It gets eaten by autocannons, so that is the biggest issue that it has. The armor it has is worthless against autocannons, and autocannons will just decimate you. The next vehicle is the Independent. This vehicle is a chunky boy and used to be the oldest vehicle in ground, but now it isn't because the FCM exists. So this vehicle has access to a 47mm in a bulb turret, and then also a bunch of 7.7mm Vickers, 2 looking forward and 2 looking back. It has not a very powerful engine, it's pretty heavy, and also it doesn't have a lot of penetration on the 47mm, and also not the greatest fire rate. A lot of the crew also are all just hugging each other in the front, so if you get shot in the front with your good old 29 or 28mm of armor, you're just going to get annihilated. So not a good vehicle, funny to look at, but not fun to play. Crusader the Saint is fun to play. It's a fantastic vehicle that exists. This is at 2.7. It's a very mobile scout. Once again, vertical stab on the 2-pounder. Does a lot of damage with its plinky plonk. And one of the main things that the Crusader has is very good gun depression, very good mobility, and a ton of smoke grenades. This means that you can be able to move around the map at great kind of stress, and also just wander around and do a ton of really cool stuff with it. So definitely worth giving a go at. The Cromwell 5 RP3 is the next one. This is just a Cromwell 5 with access to a few rockets attached. The rockets don't really give anything. They're very inaccurate. They're very hard to hit stuff with, and also the 75mm Cromwell 5 is probably worse than the other vehicles that are around the BR, namely the other Cromwell and also the Sherman 2. So it's kind of the worst of the bunch. It doesn't have a lot of armor. The gun is fine, but it's, as I said, worse than the ones that are available here. The Cromwell 1 feels a lot better, showed us the Sherman 2. I suppose if you want to run it at 3.3 with the Sark Mark 6 and the standard Cromwell, you can have a good time, but it's also way overpriced. The Trisniek exists. This is just a copy of the standard British Sherman Firefly. It's a Sherman with access to the 17-pounder. Does a lot of work with it. You don't have great gun depression, but you have an okay reload and also a pretty good penetrating round, which does do a decent chunk of damage. You've also got some smoke grenades to keep yourself alive. I'd say this is a pretty bang standard vehicle. You know, it works well, it doesn't do anything too crazy. I think overall it's quite nice, especially with the 50 cal as a bit of AA support too. The AC4 exists, the Aussie Wonder. I think this one's fun. It looks like somebody's nicked my tracks. But the AC4 is quite good because it has the 17-pounder. It has wonky armor, which is all around it, and also it has the Shot Mark 8. It doesn't have the APDS, which is why it's not higher BR, but it can penetrate everything it wants to with the standard AP. And I would say this vehicle is fun, mainly because of the fact that people don't really know where to shoot it, so rounds just get stuck in very awkward places where they shouldn't get stuck. The transmission's also pretty good, meaning that you can reverse and get out of there pretty quickly too, which is nice. You also have the Centurion Action X. This is a Centurion chassis with a interesting 20-pounder on it, but the main thing that makes it different compared to the other standard Centurions is this turret. The turret has a really weird area in the middle, which angles at very odd areas, meaning that the rounds can just kind of bounce off of it. Everything internally is very similar to a Centurion in the way that it's set up. It has the 2-plane stabilizer and also the APDS, which serve it incredibly well, which is good, and it's very fun to use. Highly recommend it, especially since Britain's very strong around these BRs, especially since, you know, you can't get into that, well, you hardly get into that 8790 area, which is quite good. The Vigianta also exists and is discounted. This one's at 8.3. It's very similar to the standard Vickers that you see in the tech tree. It does have the 105 L7A1. The great thing about the Vigianta and the Vickers in general is they actually have a better reload than the standard 105s. So you can see there the base reload is 6.5, where usually the base reload is either 7.1 or 8.7 depending on the gun. So this having a better reload than most means you can always get 2 shots off to other people's 1, and you can do really well with it, which is fantastic. The vehicle has access to APDS and heat. Both shells work very well. Doesn't have any rangefinder, which kind of sucks for 8.3, but still can do a lot of work. For me, I've always enjoyed playing the Vickers tanks, and the Vigianta would be no different. The last one for ground is the Khalid. The Khalid, imagine you take a Chieftain and you actually put in a decent engine. That's basically what the Khalid is. It has a good transmission too, with the good engine, so it can go forward and backwards at a good click, and that means that you can play the 120mm Chieftain in a pretty decent way. It still only gets access to the L23 though, which is completely fine for 9.3. It doesn't get access to thermals or smoke shells, if I remember. Oh no, it does get smoke grenades, never mind. And it does get the laser rangefinder, which is nice too. So this vehicle, I am not a huge fan of it because the Chieftain platform, even though I generally do well with it, kind of annoys me. This one would probably be better than most, especially since it has quite a fun little BR around it. The VFM5, which is really enjoyable, and the backup Oliphant Mark II, which is a fun vehicle when spaded. Both premium helicopters are available on discount for Britain. You got the G-Lynx to start off with. This fires some pretty nice missiles. You have access to the Hellfires, which can fire at 8 kilometers. You also have the ATASs, so you can keep yourself alive from the air. And, of course, MVDs. So this thing is tiny. It also has a really nice optic on it with the thermals, so you can stay away from the battle, and then you can use the Hellfires from range to just donk people with. It's kind of crazy how effective this thing can be just by doing that. I've seen a lot of them over the years just do a ton of really nice work. So you don't really have too much defenses, but you mainly have your mobility as a defense and sitting very, very close to mountains and stuff like that, so you can dip in and out to do well. The Roy Valk, I'm not entirely sure when it came back as a GE vehicle. I don't know if it's on sale or not, but, you know, the vehicle is good. It's at 11.3, so you can run it with your 11.3, 11.7 lineup. You have access to the Mokopa, which has a very good firing range and also very good penetration and speed on the ATGM, and also the Mistrals, which are really good too. So offensive-wise, very good. More is nice as well. It has the thermals for the pilot, who also has fantastic optics. This is a really good addition to any top-tier ground lineup. For aviation, there is a ton of GE vehicles. There is just a metric amount of them. Starting off with Tux Gladiator. This obviously is just a Gladiator. If you want to pick it up, you can. There's not really much point since the standard Gladiators are right in the tech tree. Actually, one of them might not be here anymore. I can't remember. Maybe one was removed. But yeah, it's just a Gladiator. It's got decent armament. It's a very middling biplane. It doesn't do anything crazy well. The Wirraway, though, is very fun because it's an Australian plane and has a very unique way that it's built and has access to quite a nice little armament with two 500s and two 250s, which is cool. It also gets access to the Vickers guns, so you can do a little bit of damage with these, and also it gets access to a Vickers turret too. It's quite nice to use in ground forces and also naval forces, and a little bit of fun in air as well, where you can just wander around and hit things. I generally think it's not too bad. Then you've got the Catalina Mark III. It's just another Catalina, which is a premium. I feel like there's so many nations that have premiums that are in this They have so many Catalinas for just different nations. This one is more of a standard one. You know, you have the 7.62 in the front, you have the 7.62 on the bottom, and 250 cals here. Plus the standard kind of secondary armaments, so nothing too crazy there. So if you want a vehicle which gives you a lot of boom, but not a lot of flight capabilities, the Catalina is for you. Then you got the Avenger Mark II, which is pretty much doing the same thing. This is a big booty boy. There is a lot going on for the Avenger Mark II. It has some 50 cals going forward, it has some turrets going backwards, but the girth of this thing shouldn't be unanswered because it just has so many weird armaments once again. A 2,000 pound bomb, the Mark 1344, which is a very good torpedo, then also the Uncle Toms and the 500 pounders. So this vehicle really is, if you have air superiority, you can bring this thing in and donk a few targets. If you don't, then you will be annihilated because it can't defend itself. The Hudson is very similar to that, but it also doesn't have a very good bomb load. It has this weird turret on the back, this dual Browning turret right here. And also it has an offensive set of Browning machine guns too, but this is very much a vehicle that doesn't really do anything well. It doesn't maneuver well, it doesn't have a good bomb load, it doesn't have great turrets. It's a very middling vehicle, which isn't worth your time. The other one is the Havoc, which is right here. This is a British version of the A20. It's very different though. It's got the Pratt & Whitney S3 CGs, which make it quite quick around the place for a 2.0. You have quite a lot of crew, and then also you have some 7.7 Vickers guns at the back, one on the top and one at the bottom. The main thing about this vehicle though is your survivability is from your speed, not necessarily from the guns, and it does get 4.500s, so you can use that quite effectively too. It's another middling vehicle, but a lot more fun to play than the Hudson because of the speed it has access to. The Corsair F Mark II is just a standard Corsair. It works well. It's still at 2.7, so unlike other Corsairs which have gone up in BR, this one is still at a low BR and still very, very good. It really should be seen as a fantastic vehicle, and they even gave it a 1,000 pound bomb just in case you wanted to use it in ground forces. It's really nice, this one. The Venture is just a Mark IIA Spitfire. Very maneuverable, engine overheats when it wants to, and does have the guns which don't do a ton of damage but do enough to annoy an enemy. But the main thing you got to watch out for is the engine overheating. The other thing is it's a starter pack vehicle, so just wait until the starter pack's on and then you can pick it up through there and you'll be able to get it for a lot cheaper. The Boomerang Mark I is also here as a vehicle. 220mm Spanos, 4 7.7mm Brownings too, so you can have a bit of fun with all of this stuff, which is quite cool. It used to be a very maneuverable vehicle, but well, I suppose it still is right now, but they ended up adding a ton of vehicles around this BR which are way more maneuverable because they're able to retain their energy more, so they can do more and more and more turning, and you just kind of get stuck there wondering what life is about. So even though they updated this model more recently, it isn't in the best position. The Hellcat is though. It's at 3.3. It for some reason didn't get down BR'd when the other Hellcats did, and also it gets access to the torpedo, the Mark 1344, so it's very good for naval forces, and also gets the 2,000 pound bomb too if you really want to annihilate somebody. But the main one is the 3-1000s that you can see here. This makes it very good in ground, very good in naval, and even in air it also is quite nice to play too. So I really like the Hellcat Mark II, a very good pickup and well worth it. The Thunderbolt is there too. This is just another Razorback Thunderbolt. I've talked about this many times in different tech trees. Very good high boom and zoom fighter. Very nice bomb load for naval and ground, and a lot of ammunition and fuel, so you can stay in the fight for a long time if you want to. The Mustang Mark 1A is also there. This one's a little bit odd as a vehicle to play, but one of the things I like about it is the amount of camos that it has. So you can actually grind out all the camos and have a good time. This one has 4 Hispanos, so whatever you hit, they're going to die. And the cool thing about it is in ground forces, the Hispanos do actually pen quite a lot. So you can top down a lot of enemies and annihilate them, whether they're Panzer IVs or others. This works really well with stuff like the Cromwells and the Sherman 2s, and at the same time as a rank 3, so you can do your dailies and specials with it, which is huge for a vehicle like this. The other one is the MB5. The MB5 is one of those that I'm not a huge fan of. It has a hydroprop engine with the Griffin 83. It's probably the only Griffin in the game which doesn't feel very powerful because it takes a long time to be able to get to altitude, and also doesn't turn very well and just doesn't feel great, especially since you have so many vehicles around this BR which are either labeled Spitfire or Tempest or whatever, which just feels so much better than it to fly around. So yes, I really don't like this thing. I think it usually feels pretty bad to play. Talking about Spitfires, we have the Mark 4C, which is over here. The Mark 4C is a interesting one because it's a Griffin Spit. It's one of the earlier Griffin Spits, so it actually has a reasonable BR for a Griffin Spit, and it has 477 Brownings plus 2 Hispanos and also a bomb on top of it too. This is a really fun vehicle. It's the engine power of the early Griffin Spits really sets it apart from a lot of the competition that you fight, and it is a massive increase compared to what you used to with the Merlin engines. So those 5.7 Spitfires, whether they're in the tech tree or whether they're in the premiums as the Griffin ones, are really fun and very enjoyable. The Hornet Mark 1 is just a copy of the standard Hornet. There's really no difference between it. I think there's a slight tail difference or something like that, meaning that you have a high altitude bomber interceptor, which works very well in that role with the Hispano Mark 5s, and then you can work as a very good support fighter as well. You also have secondary ordnance, so you can bring it into ground if you want, but I don't think it's good in ground. I think there are much better machines. The Hornet is much better as a anti-bomber, then anti-attacker, then anti-fighter after that. So basically working your way down to downtown. Then you also have the Reaper, which is a bomber meteor. Unless you're going to use this in ground, don't bother with it, especially after the BR changes they just did. This thing will get murdered. But in ground, it does have the 4-1000s, so you can at least do something with that, and you also have a really cool camo. But just understand, after the BR changes, this is in a terrible position and will just get annihilated by the MiG-15s, the Sabres, and everything else that is around. The Attacker FB2 is also there. This one can be quite a nice cast threat too, because it has the 2 1,000 pounders, which are right here. This is a very similar copy to the Attacker that you have in the tech tree, and it has the 4 Mark 5 Hispanos. Now I know that they are on the wings, so you have to worry about convergence, but generally I don't think it's too bad on this one. It seems to work very well. I've always enjoyed the Attacker quite a lot. You know, it moves through the air very nicely, and also, surprisingly, its elevator has quite a lot of give to it, which a lot of these other vehicles, it isn't the case. The Sea Vixen is also there. Used to be pretty fun. Not sure how it is now, just because of the BR changes that have just come in. I would probably stay away from it for now, because it relies on destroying people with missiles, and since the red tops or the fire streaks, which are its main missiles, are not exactly great at range, you're generally going to deal with a lot faster vehicles nowadays that are going to dominate the meta. So for a Sea Vixen, it's going to be very meta dependent on whether it's good or not. If you play around your BR, you'll have a great time. If you play at 9.3, which is most likely, you'll die over and over again. Then you have the Harrier GR1. Don't bother with it. They nerfed this vehicle into the ground. They took away its air spawn. The SRAMs are nowhere near as good as they used to be. And also it doesn't have countermeasures. And you are just food for 10-3s. So don't bother with it. You'll just waste your time. For Naval, we have a few things for Britain. Not crazy stuff though. The coastal's in a bit of a rough place. So we start off with the MTB-1. This is just a copy of the MTB-11 here. The only difference is, I believe, is it even the Lewis guns? No, they're exactly the same. So the difference is this one gets torpedoes, but I'm pretty sure this one does too. I just have the depth charges on for some reason. So yeah, you can get this. It's a waste of time. The Lewis machine guns are really poor at doing damage in Naval. They do absolutely no damage, and you have to be right next to a target to even hurt it, so don't even bother. The MG75 has a similar issue, where you have the 40mm in the front, and then you have 20mm in the back, but low survivability, not a lot of speed compared to other competitors, and also this isn't a Bofors, it's a standard QF Mark II, so it has a lot smaller clip than the other one, and the reload is quite long, so not really worth it in my opinion. Then you have the Orla, which is right here. The Orla has a 76 on the front, two 20s, and a bunch of 7.62s. I've seen these do really well, but since the last major update, after they did some of the armor changes, I have seen a lot of them just get beasted. So I'm not entirely sure where the Orla is in terms of its power, but my guess is not too strong, but we'd have to see going forward how it would do. So I don't have too many comments on this one. The Whitby, though, which is at a similar BR of 3.7, this one is an oddity. You know, it has a dual-mounted 4.5-inch. It also has a dual-mounted 40 on the back, and then the Limbo mortar, which you can find here. This vehicle is very good at killing coastal vehicles, terrible at dealing with blue water vehicles, and because it gets a blue water spawn, you are basically just a destroyer with two guns and nothing else. Now at 3.7 you can kind of get away with that with these 4.5-inch guns, because 20 rounds per minute is pretty nice, but at the same time you're going to need a little bit more from it to actually be useful. There's still vehicles which outdo you in firepower, and they are reserves, so it's quite pricey to lose to reserve blue water vehicles. Then you have the Verdun, which has turned up. This one has the 4.5-inch guns, or the 4-inch guns, sorry, the 102mm. They have a very good fire rate on them. You can see 20 rounds per minute, and also there are 4 of them, plus some 20s and 12.7s. Once again, as I said about the other vehicle, this vehicle has more firepower than the Whitby, and it's the same BR, and it's literally basically a reserve in the blue water tech tree. Like, it's kind of crazy. I think this one's fine, but you don't need it. Now that they made it better with the Vega and also the Calp, with the start of the British tech tree, you don't need to buy a premium to get out of it quickly. You also have the Valhalla, which is here too. Not entirely sure why the Valhalla exists, but it's a bad vehicle. It has 4 single 4-inch cannons on it, and also it has these weird tri-torpedo tubes, which are set up in a triangular fashion, which is just odd. It's also only got 176mm, so it has no AA support, and the guns themselves, these 4-inch cannons, also have a terrible fire rate. So there is no point in picking this up. It has half the fire rate, basically, of the Verdun. So why not just play the Verdun? It never made sense to me why the Valhalla even existed. Then you got the Jervis, which is here. The Jervis is a much more standard destroyer compared to a lot of the British destroyers you'll be used to. So it has basically 6 of the 4.7-inch cannons. So 2 turrets on the front, 1 turret on the back. You also have a quad pom-pom or a quad 40 right here. And then the 4 dual 20s and torpedoes in the center. One of the problems with the British destroyers is that their torpedo angles are really poor. So it's really annoying dealing with these things, but yeah, it's something you'll get used to. The guns put out a decent amount of firepower. They do ammo rack quite easily, which sucks, but you do have a good change of shells, and you can bring along pretty much everything you want, which is kind of cool. The next one that's on offer is the Montgomery, which is here. This is just a town class, so same as the Churchill. Don't buy this, it's a waste of time. It's one of the worst destroyers in the game. You'll just have a terrible time. There's no point in it. And then you have the Belfast. The Diamond isn't on sale, but it is a good pickup. But it's obviously going to be better when it's discounted. The Belfast is fine. It's very similar to the Southampton that's in the tech tree. It has 4 triple mounted 6-inch cannons. And after spading the Southampton, these guns may not be as high caliber as a lot of the other British machines at 5.7, but they can definitely outmatch in damage the 8-inch guns. Basically, because of the fire rate of 8 rounds per minute, you can consistently keep up a volley on this thing, and also with the 4 dual 4 inches in the middle and the 40s as well to keep your AA going, it can work really well. You also have HE, CPBC, a HETF, and a VT on the 6-inch guns, so you can use this as an AA destroyer if you really feel like it. It also has really nice rewards on it too, and after playing 5.7 Britain, you have a ton of vehicles in there, all with varying degrees of usefulness. I would say the Belfast is one of the better ones. That's all the stuff for Britain. As always, look after yourselves. Peace be with you, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Tullio Pontecorvo, Brendan Quinn, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pieman, Wartinder, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Alan Hacker, Ozzy Panzer, Liam Shear, Opium Prime, Lafouche, Cam Arslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R. for supporting the channel.